At this time, I would like to welcome Maria Echeveste, Senior Fellow for the Center for Latin American Studies, to come to the stage and offer a toast to help us honor this year's Global Ambassador of Peace and Public Service Award recipient, Irving Tragen. Maria.
Well, it is truly an honor to be able to offer a toast to Irving. My husband, Christopher Edley, could not be here with us, a little illness, but we got to know Irving because Irving is a graduate of Berkeley Law School, as am I. And what I want to say about this relationship and friendship that we have built over the years. Now, I know there are very young people here. And we're so excited that there is a next generation. But there is something that some of us older people have accumulated, some wisdom. And one of the things that Irving, with his illustrious career at the State Department, working on issues of international development in Latin America, was when he shared with me how important it was to build institutions, the rule of law. At this moment in time, throughout our country, throughout the world, the institutions of rule of law, of accountability, of transparency are so important. And his experience to be able to look at his work and say, we should have done more in that area, well, should be a lesson we should all take to heart. So, Irving, I'm so glad that Christopher and I had a chance to get to know you, to work with you. And let me raise a glass to an illustrious contributor to civil society, to our country, to the issue of progress in the world. Irving. Hear, hear.
We're so delighted to present this year's Global Ambassador of Peace and Public Service Award to Irving Tragen, who has exemplified iHouse principles daily in his personal and professional life. He served over 55 years in inter-American affairs. He was in the Foreign Service with diplomatic and development assignments in Mexico, El Salvador, Chile, Peru, Venezuela, Bolivia, Guatemala, and Panama. If you weren't counting, that's 8 countries. He worked with the Central American Market and helped found the Inter-American Foundation. He also spent 15 years with the Organization of American States, initially in its Econ Development Program, and then for nearly a decade as the first Executive Secretary of the Inter-American Drug Commission, created in 1986 to combat drug trafficking and drug abuse from Canada to Argentina. We are honored to bestow this year's award to Irving Tragen, whose amazing life and career clearly demonstrates why we believe that Dos Equis clearly got it wrong. That imposter they sent off into outer space is a charlatan, as we know that Irving Tragen is clearly the most interesting man in the world. And as we take a look at this video, I would ask Chancellor Chris and Irving to slowly make your way up, but enjoy this video because it highlights Irving in a most insightful way.
His charm is so contagious, vaccines have been created for it. Years ago, he built a city out of blocks. Today, over 600,000 people live and work there. He is the only man to ever ace a Rorschach test. His legend precedes him, the way lightning precedes thunder. He is the most interesting man in the world.
The things you have heard about me, they are all true. It is true that I was awarded the Global Ambassador of Peace and Public Service Award from Inetrnational House. And yet, the most interesting thing about me is that I married the most remarkable woman in the world, Eleanor Dodson, who I met one spectacular evening dancing. I don't always come to Berkeley, but when I do, I prefer to visit iHouse. Stay thirsty, my friends.
Irving, we're so pleased to present you with our 2018 Global Ambassador of Peace and Public Service Award, given to Irving Tragen, iHouse, 1943 to 1947.
Thank you.
Hold that up so the photographer can see it. Joy will take that from you. And Diane Dwyer will be our moderator. As you know, Diane is an exceptional moderator for this type of work, and we're so pleased she's here to lead us through this part of the program. Diane.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you so much, and thank you both for being here. What a great night. Isn't it wonderful? Don't you love being a Cal Bear? I just love being a Cal Bear. It's a wonderful place. So we are mixing it up a little bit from previous galas where we're doing a three-way conversation here. We figured since it is the Chancellor's first year at the gala that we wanted to include you and get your insights as well on the current and the future scene for Cal and for iHouse, and then Irving, of course, from the past, the present, and the future as well. So we're going to start with Irving and the most interesting man in the world, because that seems like a good place to start. You have visited the world, changed the world, and in all of that, in all of your stories we've heard, what have you gleaned most inspiration from in life, but particularly since we're in this beautiful place here at iHouse?
Well, I think fundamentally it was the exposure to different cultures, different nationalities, different ways of looking at problems. The perceptions that one acquires living in Inetrnational House changes you from a provincial boy from San Francisco to someone who basically understands the world is much broader, that people of different cultures, once you establish a principle of listening rather than forming preconceived stereotypes, you find that we share many of the same basic human objectives. And I think that iHouse and UC Berkeley, for me, was the place that essentially led me to believe that the way to build understanding is by building bridges, not walls.
I think most in the room would agree.
Yes.
Chancellor, for you, you come in contact with many spectacular Cal alums along the way, including Irving sitting next to you. Is there a commonality in these stories of these folks who have really, I think all Cal alums are wonderful, but there are those who have really made a difference in the world. And do you see a commonality in their stories or in their purpose?
I certainly see a commonality in their stories. Whether you're an undergraduate or graduate student, when you come here, these are such formative years in your life. They're when you become the person that you aspire to be. And so there's no similarity in the paths that people take, but there's a similarity in the genesis of the path, which is that it started here where I understood what I could aspire to, what I could be.
That is what is so wonderful about this time, in particular in a place like Berkeley, where there's so many accomplished people to get to meet and get to imagine being, I suppose, along the way. So for both of you on that front, are there some stories you have that exemplify that remind you of sort of, particularly since we're here in this beautiful iHouse, where iHouse has really made a difference to the university, to your life? And Irving, I'll start with you because I know you have a couple of, meeting your wife here was one of them, of course, that changed lives. But if you could share some of those with us.
Well, let me start. The most important thing in my life was meeting my wife here at iHouse. I have to say I was a typical law school nerd. I went down to the law library about 8 o'clock in the morning and tried to stay one step ahead of the professors. And I'd come back and I saw in my sophomore year this absolutely sparkling, auburn-haired young lady who spent a lot of her time organizing tables of people of different nationalities and getting them to sit down together and talk out problems. A lot of prejudices, a lot of preconceptions, and Ellie felt from the very beginning that unless we had dialogue, we wouldn't be able to deal with the problems. Now, one night, I came home from law school, and a colleague who lived we were then in the fraternities, not in the big house, came over to me and he said, "Look, I made 2 dates for Friday night. And would you take out the auburn-haired girl for me?" And at that point, she was known as Bunny to everybody. And I said, "Oh no, I don't have the time. I've got to prepare for," and he insisted, and he said, "I'll talk to her." And up to that point, I'd been too shy to talk to her. And she actually said yes, she'd go to the dance with me. Now, I was very hard of hearing, but I always loved to dance, and I could always feel the rhythm. We had the most wonderful evening. And 3 years later, she married me.
Well, that is certainly life-changing. And Bunny, because she was born on Easter Sunday, I understand,
yes,
correct?
she was born April 1st, Easter Sunday. And this year was April 1st, Easter Sunday. And her father took one look at her and called her his Easter Bunny. And all of the years in iHouse, she was known as Bunny. And she became the receptionist here at the big house in 46 and 47 when I was studying in Chile. And we made all of our plans to get married here in iHouse. We were married at St. Albans Church around the corner. And Estelle Carlson, who was then one of the officials of iHouse, hosted our reception in the Berkeley Hills. And almost everyone at our wedding was an iHouser.
That is living and breathing iHouse.
Yeah.
All right, Chancellor, try to one-up that story.
Oh, I can't one-up that story, but I'll tell us two stories 150 years apart. The first is about the founding of Berkeley. It's our sesquicentennial, as you all know. And the founders of Berkeley were very self-conscious that this was the first university that was looking west over the Pacific. And that when Berkeley moved from Oakland, where it was first located, to Strawberry Canyon, it was, the founders felt we were looking out through the Golden Gate toward Asia. So Berkeley was an international university from its very foundation. But the story 150 years later is actually one from tonight. I was talking to a young man at the reception, I assume he's still in the room, named Hannibal from Ethiopia. And Hannibal said that we were talking about what was special about iHouse, and he said, if you come from a fairly homogeneous country like mine, you learn to look with different eyes, to understand different ways of seeing the world that come from being in an international community. And that rang so true to me as one of the great benefits that iHouse has and that international experience generally has to offer students from all over the world.
Okay, so on that note, how do we go forward and spread what's going on at Cal with international students, but specifically that special experience that we get here at iHouse? How can that influence more? It already has quite a big influence, I think, on Cal, but sort of that next step.
Well, I think that there are two next steps. One is just the person-to-person understanding of how things look from a different perspective, from a different location, through a different set of glasses. But also, I believe that fosters international institutions and international understanding, and it's what we should all be committed to.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Could I just add a point?
I would love you to.
One of the things that my wife and I became convinced of, and I'll go back to what Maria Echaveste said, we believe in the rule of law. And we have found in working in foreign countries that the concepts, the theories, the administration of law is quite different from country to country. And for that reason, my wife and I have endowed a chair at the law school in comparative law. And it seems to me, as our world gets smaller and our interactions become more intense, unless we understand the differences and find the way to bridge the differences, our hope for universal peace is not going to be achieved. So I thought I'd like to add that to what the Chancellor said, because I hope I'm going to be able to contribute when I pass to creating something that the Chancellor, the Dean of the Law School, and all of the students in iHouse and on the campus can help enrich our understanding of the interaction of peoples in our world.
Thank you for doing that. Thank you. And you mentioned bridging the gap. And I did a little cyber stalking of you over the last few weeks. And one of the stories that stood out to me was a story involving square dancing. And some dancing here, that started kind of here, but took you all the way to another country. Can you share that story with us?
Well, I had been assigned to be labor attaché in the U.S. Embassy in Venezuela. Now, as many of you know, in Venezuelan history for 140 years, there had been only one constitutional election for president, and that president lasted 1 year. In 1959, they had an election in which Romulo Betancourt became president, and that was shortly after that I was assigned to Venezuela. Not only did I work with the labor unions, but I was trying to open dialogue between corporate executives and the union leaders. A democracy functions when the various pieces come together and find the basis of working together. Now, we had been there a few months, and my wife and I thought about what are we going to do, something a little different. And one of the most respected Americans in Latin America was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And we organized a party on his birthday. I think it's January 30th, if my memory is not too hazy. And through friends, we got a letter from Eleanor Roosevelt, which I had the privilege of reading, both in English and Spanish. And then I had a friend who worked in the U.S. Information Agency who played the guitar and called square dances.
So what would you do?
All right. We had the wives of labor leaders dancing with corporate executives. We had labor leaders dancing with the wives of our embassy officials. It was a mixer. And let's say about halfway through, a couple of the union leaders left, and I said to my wife, "Oh my God, this isn't working." And a few minutes later, they came back with their own instruments.
Oh.
And when we finished the square dance, we had an hour and a half of dancing, of the mixing of people, and the beginning of what I had hoped would promote promise for civic society. But a square dance is a wonderful way of mixing people.
I'll try it next time. I'll
Good.
try it. Okay, for both of you, and Chancellor, I'll start with you. Since you just gave us one suggestion to go out and do some square dancing, is there anything you'd like to ask? We've got this group of wonderful folks here who all believe in iHouse, all believe in mixing cultures and understanding cultures as best we can. Anything you'd ask of us as we go off today to try to make a difference for Berkeley, for the iHouse?
Well, two things. First of all, support iHouse.
Okay, thank you.
But the other thing that I ask, iHouse is such a wonderful community, and I've heard so many testimonies over the decade to its transformative impact on the people who live here. But it would be great to take iHouse even more to the community. This is a world where it's so hard for people to find common ground. And I think that iHouse is an epitome of finding common ground through difference. And I hope that that would be something you could take to the campus and invite the campus often into iHouse. I was being told that football players love to come here and really challenge your kitchen. With their appetites.
Right.
But it was a joke, but I think it's so important to bring this iHouse spirit to the campus.
I couldn't agree more. That would be a wonderful thing to get to do more of. Irving, sir, you have the last word.
Well, I would like to urge everyone in this room to rededicate him and herself to the principles upon which the Rockefeller brothers created International House. The precepts, the principles, the way of life, and also to the vision of the founders of our university 150 years ago, and dedicate ourselves in our everyday efforts to promote the principles, to carry forward the concept of human dignity, and to commit ourselves to make our society as good as it should be.
So thank you both very much for being here and for sharing your vision of iHouse and the past of iHouse as well, and Berkeley. And welcome, Chancellor. to iHouse and to UC Berkeley, although you've been here a long time. But before we say goodnight, I have a little treat. So, Irving, we are keepers of documents here at iHouse. I'm not kidding. This is amazing. So we have found your application, handwritten from 1942 to the iHouse. And I want to read a quote from it. The application had a question that has not changed since 1942, which is, what influenced you to apply for membership to Inetrnational House? And you replied, a few basic causes. Number 1, my major in political science, state and foreign affairs. Number 2, my chosen profession, international law. Number 3, my natural desire for the association with culture. Number 4, my wish to learn more of the people of the world. And number 5, my desire to have a fine place to live and to work. Irving, you exemplify the mission of iHouse, and it is our honor, collectively, to name you as this year's Global Ambassador of Peace and Public Service. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm going to hand over, we may take it back, but your application to take a look at as well, to reminisce. And not only his application, but his wife Ellie's application, or Bunny's application as well, is included, to get to sort of see her words again and what it meant to her to be here at iHouse and apply to iHouse. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Congratulations.
I'm so honored to be with you.
Oh, I'm so honored to be with you.
Thank you, Irving. Thank you so much. Chancellor, thank you.